Thank you. Okay. Let's start Amar Ula and Chavav Amid Beis on the bottom.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh my gosh, 1 second. Ibn Naftali, can you hear me? So, 1 second.
Yeah,
I still can't hear you.
I'm hearing all right.
Oh,
he can't hear me.
see if Chaim hears Ibn Naftali.
I'll leave and I'll try to come back.
Maybe the top.
1 second. No. Maybe he has. But he can't hear us. But I even can't explain. Okay. Chaim, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so we're gonna start from Amar Ula on Chavav Amid Beis. Okay, we thank Hashem that we're playing Torah every day. It's of our learning. Should have Beis of English immediately. Learning, living Nishma, Basra Daf, and the tunnels have been the tunnels have been seen, and also the Nishma for Shlema for Avram David Ben Sarah, and you got to Eliezer Ben Teged Superior. So yeah, sorry about the craziness in the flights. And Shikayach to Dr. Stein and Naftali and Chaim. Okay. Okay, so the Gemara
things worked out because we were all saying, "Tell them that you'll be back for this morning."
Thank you. It's not good work. I got back a day earlier. It took me a day of flying, but I flew all over the East Coast yesterday. Stops everywhere just to get back. Okay. So Amar Ula says, Ilana Samach Lameitzar. A tree that's growing on the border. People like to do this. They grow a tree on the border that way they don't have to take up all their own space with the roots. You grow it along the border. It's the best place to put it. You can surround your area with trees. But the only thing is that it's growing and the nutrients are coming from the other guy's soil. So if it's on the border, within 16 amas, that means you're not 16 amas in, you're actually on the border, less than 16 amas in, and galsanu, you're stealing from the other person because you're stealing his nutrients. And maybe bikurim, and you can't take bikurim. Now, when you bring bikurim, those are the first fruits that you bring to Yerushalayim. The first fruits that grow on your tree, you wrap the string around it, bring it to Yerushalayim. And there's a little passage that you say, in that passage contains the land that you gave to me. The problem with this is that you have to bring it from your land, and this is not considered your land. This is considered your neighbor's land, which is a slight problem. And also, he's considered a thief. Very harsh words. Anyway, the Gemara says, "Minale lu'ulaha." How does Ula know this? The Gemara is asking, how do we know 16 amos is the measurement? So, if it's from what we learned in the Mishnah, okay, there's a rule that during the Shemitah, you're not allowed to plow the field. What about before the Shemitah? So there's these rabbinic decrees that you have to stop plowing before the Shemitah at a certain point, because that's considered the fruits of the Shemitah year already. Anyway, when it comes to certain things, you have to stop already Pesach before Shemitah. We're talking about in the 6th year. If there are 10 young trees that are spread out within a Beisah, the young trees need a lot more maintenance. They need to be taken care of, saplings. So there's a special rule that 10 young saplings, you're allowed to go all the way till Rosh Hashanah, all the way till the biblical time, to take care of them, to plow the field around the roots, to give them the nutrients. Well, what we're seeing now is that 10 trees in a Basra, you're allowed to maintain them until Rosh Hashanah. Now, Kami Havelu, if there's 10 trees in a Basra, now a Basra is a 50 by 50 area, 50 by 50 amas. So what's that total? What's the square area of that? It would be 2,500. Now, if there's 10 trees in there, we're back down to 250. So each tree is surrounded by 250. So the Gemara says like this: Kama Havalu, that would be Trey Alfi v'Chamish Mea Garmidi. That would be 2,500 square amas. Kol Chad v'Chad Kama Matila, how much is each one? Mea v'Chamshin, it would be 250. So Halei Havadula, that wouldn't fit with Ula. Ula says that every tree is nourished by 16 amas to each side. So 16 amas to each side means 32. But what the Gemara does over here is it just, in a very general way, it just says 32 times 32. Now 32 times 32 is going to be 1,024. So if each tree, according to Ula, is 1,024, that's not going to match with this Mishnah that says each tree is 250. Huge discrepancy there. How does Ula get such a large area of each tree, 1,024, which is 32 times 30? Why 32 times 32? Because 16 amas, if the tree is right here, so 16 amas this way, 16 amas this way, means that tree takes up 32 amas to each side. And then it goes in the opposite, and then it goes across perpendicular, goes 32 as well. So we didn't get into pi. We just did 32 times 30. We just made it a square. 32 times 30 was, so it's not, we did just the perimeter of a square, not the perimeter of a circle.
It should be a circle.
Should be a circle. That's what the Gemara will get into that.
Well,
Okay.
With lots of land, it's easier to calculate square.
Oh, it's easier.
Sometimes you see like round.
Doing the diameter times the diameter, right?
Problem is when you have a bunch of circles together, you have a lot of space in between.
Sure. That's why, well, look, that's what we did when we were dealing with the 10 saplings. We just divided up the whole thing into by 10. Even though there's going to be spaces in between the circles. Okay. The Dula doesn't fit match with Dula because 250 is not 1,024. It must be from the following Mishnah. The following Mishnah says, you have three trees that belong to three different people, and it's in a field. Well, it's before Shavuot. It's before Shemitah. The rule is that you're allowed to maintain that until Shavuot. Not the 10 saplings, but you're allowed to go all the way to Rosh Hashanah. This is 10. This is 3 trees that you're allowed to maintain up until Shavuot. So it's a little bit more lenient. It's not like the grain field where you have to actually stop by Pesach. This 3 trees is stayil, and you're allowed to go up until Shavuos. Well, how big is this area here? Said it's a base. So again, we're into 2,500 square amas, and we have 3 trees in there. So now, how much does each tree take up from this space? So it would be 2,500 divided by 3, which would give me 833.3. 833.3 would be 833.3 would be the how much each tree would be being nourished. Well, 833 is not 1,024. Still less than 1,024. So Ula's measurement is kama havalu. How much does this come out to? So it says, well, trei alfi v'hemia garmidi. The whole area of a besa is 2,500. The kolchad kama matile. If you have 3 trees in there, So how much would each tree be taking up from that 2,500? Say Tamni Meyot plus on the plus of a tilsa. It's 833 and a third.
Is this area?
Yeah, this is the area. It says Akati Nafishali lay the Ula. But Ula's measurement is still more than this, because Ula's measurement is 1,024. And now from this Mishnah, we only have 833.3. The Gemara says Laidak. Well, Ula wasn't exactly precise. He said 1,024. It's close enough. It's close enough to 833. Gemara says, Eimer Damrinan Laidak L'chumra. What did Ula tell us? Ula said that you don't have to take Bikurim. Now, if it's that close to your neighbor's property, you don't take Bikurim if you planted it that close. Now, if it's not accurate, because really it could be even closer to your neighbor's property and still, and you still have to take Bikurim, then how could Ula give me a larger measurement telling me that don't worry about your Bikurim because he's just rounding off the measurement to the nearest 1,000 or whatever. But really what he's doing is he's giving me a leniency. You can only round it off if you're being stricter, right? When you owe tzedakah $800, $1,000, you can't say, well, $800 is close enough. You can do it the other way if you want. If you owe 800, you can say, well, I'll give 1,000. But here, it's Ula's telling me that if it's 1,000 amas in a distance from the neighbors, it's not exactly like that. But if the area is distant from the neighbor's property by 1,000, you don't have to bring bikurim. But really, the halacha is only if it's 800, you don't have to bring bikurim. And there's an extra area there that he's exempting from bikurim, which is not accurate. Because the nutrients are coming from the neighbor, yeah. So the Gemara is asking, I can understand if you want it to be not accurate and round it off to the nearest whatever. That's if you want to be strict. But lakula laidak miyamnin, do we go lenient and say laidak that we're just rounding it off? It's a biblical law. You would take it. You would take it, but you don't say the passage. Here we're saying that he doesn't have to take it. So the Gemara answers, Mi savris beribur kamrinan bigula kamrinan. Do you think we're talking about a square? We're talking about a circle. And all of our measurements, the reason why we got 1,024 was because we did 32 times 32. But you're not supposed to do 32 times 32. How do you do this? How do you get the area of a circle? I forget, you do the radius squared, right? Radius by pi. I didn't do this on paper, but times pi. Right, that's how you get the area. Right? Do you have a calculator? What's 16 times 16 times 3, or 3.14? You get 803? Okay. What happens if we do it this way? The way we're going to do it now is interesting. I'll tell you how to do it. It goes the way the Gemara does it. It says, how much is a square bigger than a circle? So it says, Ravia, it's a quarter more. Now, the reason why the Gemara says it's a quarter more is because if I have a square, I remember this sort of Gemara. If I have a square that's a 1 by 1, oh, so it's pi times the radius square. Okay. So if I have a box that's a 1 by 1, so if I measure the perimeter is going to be 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. If I have a circle that's a 1 by 1, the diameter is 1 by 1, then the circle is going to be 3. 3.14, but it's going to be 3. So basically, the square is a quarter more than the circle, right? Starting at that basic, just with that. So now what we're looking at is a square of 1,024 is going to be a quarter more than the circle. So what I have to do is I have to get a quarter off this 1,024. So what I'll do is I'll times it by 0.75, right? Just multiply it by 0.75. And what do you get? Times it by 0.75. You should get 768. 1024 times 0.75. you can divide it by 4 and get whatever it's going to be.
That's harder.
768. Perfect.
768, yeah.
Okay.
I think the 0.75 is.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. But I'm saying if you want to do it slowly, you divide it into quarters and then you subtract 1/4 from it. So you do 0.75. So we have 768. So kama meruba yasra eagle revia. It's a quarter more. So pashlu zayin meya v'shitim retamnaya. What's that? What are we left with? 768. So now we said 768. 768 is what Ula really meant. What was the Mishnah? The Mishnah was 833.3. So this is a much closer than 1024, and it's also less. So Ula was saying that at 768 you don't have to. The Gemara says Akati Pashle Palgadamsa, but we're still 1/2 amma off. Now this is interesting. We're 1/2 amma off because there's a difference between Ula's 768 and the Mishnah's 833. The difference between that is 65. Add 65 to 768. It's 833. So we're off by 65. What it thinks is like this. 65 would be if you divide it in half. This is a very rough number. But what you do is if you divide it in half, you stretch it into a long strip, 65. Right? It's 65 amas. Right? 65 amas different. So divide it in half, and now we're left with a 1/2 amma. So if you divide it in half and you make it into one long strip, you'll have 130 1/2 amma. You have 1/2 an amma by 130, right? So now what he says is like this: take 33. What's 130 divided by 4? Should really be by 3, but we're going to divide it by 4 for some reason. 32.5. So what he's saying is like this: that if I divide it by 4 and I put a 1/2 an amma on each edge, so I had 16 ammas going this way, 16 ammas going that way. Remember, 16 ammas to each side of the tree, and on each side of the tree I put a 1/2 an amma because it was 32 and a half. Now we're making it 32 and a half. We're extending it by 32 and a half. If I put a 1/2 an amma on each side to the 4 sides of this, I'm gonna be exactly where, not exactly, but I'll be up to 833. I'll be at 833. Now the problem is we should have done it by a circle, we should have divided it by 3, not by 4. But
Interesting, the little pieces that are left off when you do the circle and the square is like a quarter.
Right.
It seems like it's over.
right.
SAT question.
The way the Gemara gets, the Gemara doesn't do it here, but the way the Gemara gets the difference between the circle and the square in the Gemara in Sukkah is it looks for the diameter of the that was getting a circle that's outside of a square. We're trying to get a circle outside of a square. We looked for the hypotenuse of the square of that the diagonal, the catty corner, and that would give me the diameter of the circle that would be outside the square. Here we have a circle in a square. It's easier. You just cut off the corners.
The actual difference between 2r squared and pi r squared, right? It's less than a quarter, so it would be actually closer. But instead of multiplied by 3/4, 3 divided by 4 is multiplied by 3.14 divided by 4. You would get,
if I have a
even
square,
closer.
if I have a square, how would I turn it into a circle?
You would divide it. You would multiply it by pi over 4. So instead of 0.75, it would be more like 0.80 or something. It would get you closer to where you want to be.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason the Gemara is satisfied with this sort of measurement, even though it's not exactly. Okay. So now the Gemara says, okay, that's what Ula, when Ula said that it's 16 amas, and really it's 16 and a half amas. So Ula was just rounding it off to the closest whole number, which would be 16 instead of 16 and a half. And that's what it means. He's leidak. And how he was leidak, he wasn't accurate. He wasn't exact. He was rounding it off. And the lechumer leidak, he was also going more strict. He was taking it to the lesser number. That's when you don't bring bikurim, when it's on the lower part, not. He wasn't exaggerating this year, was lessening this year, and that's how it comes out to be okay. So Ula's comes out that we have a source for Ula. Source is 3 trees in a base saw, and it works out pretty close to the same number. His was 768, and the Mishnah was 833, and we're just off by 65 in the end number and half an amma in the person in the startup number. Tashima. So come and listen. We're still going to challenge Ula. Hakaina ilan bekarkai mevi v'kair. If someone buys a tree and he buys the land together with the tree, he has to bring the bikurim, and he also has to recite the passage of bikurim, which is land that he gave to me. Now the problem is, my love, kolshu, is it not? When he even bought a drop of land by the tree, he didn't buy 16 amas to each side of the tree. It just says he bought the land of the tree, which means just whatever it's sitting on, the base of the tree, and he still bring it. According to Ula, you don't bring the bikurim if you don't have even if it's on the border, even though you own half the land, you don't bring it. Here it says he just buys the land that it's on. The Gemara says, well, how do you know that? Loi, Yud Vavam, we're talking about that you bought the land, you bought 16 amas together with it. That's what it means you bought the land. You made an assumption, and based on that assumption, you asked the kasha. But that was just an assumption. The Mishnah didn't say how much land you bought. It means you bought 16 ounces. Tashima, come and listen. There's a discussion later on in Basra. If someone buys trees, his friend's property, does he buy the land that's together with the trees? So the rule is, if there's 3 trees, if he buys 3 trees, that means he's also buying the land in between. If he's just buying a tree or 2 trees, then he's buying the tree. He's not buying the land. He owns the tree. When you buy an apartment, you own the land that's under it. So here he bought 2 trees. So the rule is, he bought 2 trees. So it says, maybe veina kaira. You bring it, but you don't recite the passage. Hashleisha, but if you buy 3 trees, maybe v'kaira. That means that you do have to bring it. Yeah, you do have to recite the passage. You do bring the bikurim and you recite the passage. My love kolshu. It must mean that how much land did you buy over there? Just a little bit of land that comes around with the trees. It means you bought the land with the tree. Doesn't mean you bought 16 amas. It says loi hachanami yud vavam. It means that you did buy 16 amas. You again, we made an assumption and we asked the kasha based on that assumption. So, well, that was an assumption. It's not accurate. Tashma. So come and listen. We're asking Kasha Zanula and we're answering him up.
That would have been yesterday if I stopped in the kids' room and I was trying to put those wooden squares in the circles.
Tashima. The professor would bring a whole plant. Tashima, Dr. Stein is here. Rabbi Kiva says, Karka kolshehu chayev b'peyo bikurim v'kaisman lav pruspa. Few halachas over here. Even a small amount of land is chayev in peya. Chayev peya means you have to leave a corner of it for the poor. Bikurim, you have to bring the first fruits to Yerushalayim. Kaisman lav pruspa, and if you lend money. When the Shemitah comes, then the person didn't pay back, so the debt gets absolved by the Shemitah. You don't collect before the 7 years, so it gets absolved. Now, if the borrower has a piece of property, so then the debt doesn't get absolved, because Hillel instituted prusbul, a prusbul, which is a concept of it's as if the debt has been collected already. Now, how is the debt collected already? Basically, you're giving it over to the Besdin to collect, but it's collected. One of the ways that it's collected already is because there's property there. Now, the way Rashi says it over here is that if there was no property to the borrower, then Hillel didn't institute it, because that's such an abnormal case that anyone would lend money without the borrower owning property. Usually you lend money, you want to make sure the borrower has something with some way to pay. So Hillel only instituted the concept of prosbul, where you can still collect after the Shemitah. He instituted only if there's property. So how much property do you need for a prosbul? It says even the smallest amount. Okay. Now, another rule. In order to acquire any personalty, any movable property, you have to lift it up or pull it. The exception to that is if you buy land, and on that land is, maybe not even on that land, maybe anywhere, is property, is personalty. You can acquire the personalty with the kinyan on the land. I'm not sure if it has to be on it or not. Could be, it doesn't have to be on it. So anyway, you can acquire, how much land do you need to acquire the personalty? How much realty do you need to acquire personalty? There's even the smallest amount. Okay, now the question is, we said that you bring bikurim, you want the smallest amount of land. That's not true. You need 16 amas. You need 833 or whatever, or 768. You need a lot of land, not just a little bit. Here we're saying you're bringing bikurim and you recite the passage. Here, what are we dealing about? We're not talking about trees. We're talking about wheat. And wheat, only if you bring bikurim from wheat. Bring bikurim from the 7 types of food, of fruits of Israel. Included in that are the 5 grains. That only takes up 2 of them. The 5 grains fit into 2. Because wheat is also spelt, and oats is also, barley is also oats, and it includes that. So and the rye goes under the wheat, I think. So
The wheat is just.
yes, the wheat would just have land that's under it. A tree would have 16 of them. The economy, I'll prove it to you. The Tani Kolshu, it says clearly Kolshu, and that could only be why is that a proof that it's wheat? Maybe it's just a kasha anula. I'm not sure. But this we can't answer, because before we also said my love kolshu. No, this was the first time where we actually said the word kolshu, and the other times we didn't say kolshu. The kolshu means the smallest amount. And the other brisa that we're asking kasha sanula, we said my love, is it not kolshu, even the smallest amount? We said no. Who said kolshu? Here's the first time we said kolshu. The Gemara is saying that we're dealing with wheat.
So that means there's no shear for wheat like there is for a tree?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Even on the head, where like take the broom, and then on commentary, this is a wheat take up to 3 tefachim.
Yeah, Tosfos asks that wheat takes up 3 tefachim. What does Tosfos answer?
And then it says it's a source of nourishment.
Yeah, it says that it's really directly opposite, but there are 3 tefachim as well. As we're going to see something similar to that to a tree, where a tree is even more than 16 amas, it's really 25 amas, but nevertheless, the main thing is the 16 amas. The tree, by a wheat, the main thing is that. Okay, and even though it spreads the 3 tefachim. Tashema, come and listen. Ilan miktasi baretz, miktasi b'chutz la'aretz. It's a classic problem. This we had. I forget where in Baba Kama. We had this where there was like a fish. It was a fish and an animal that were plowing together. They had like these things that were taking place on the border, like on the border between.
That's the story.
No.
Come jump on
No.
like that.
I remember the whole thing. The tree went like down the river, and then like replanted itself.
No, yeah, that's something else. This we were talking about on the border itself. What happens with something that's directly on the border? Anyway, over here, here's the
How
salad.
come they weren't kicked out of the Gemara?
Yeah.
I mean,
Good question over there. Anyway, if there's a tree that's planted on the border of Israel, so the Gemara says, the Brisa says, words of Rebbe, is tevel v'chulim w'rabim zabazah. You have a mixture of tevel. Tevel means produce that the tithe has not been taken. Truma hasn't been taken because it's growing in Israel. At the same time, it's also chulin. You don't need to take any tithe. You don't need to take any because it's growing outside of Israel, directly on the border. Yeah. Yeah, when I went to like Tijuana, San Diego, so there's a line that goes along. So I was standing like 1 foot on the line, 1 foot not on the line. The police comes over to me and says, I would not do that. So someone can come over to you and mug you and we won't be able to do anything. And the other side won't be able to do anything. You want to stay on one side. Anyway, okay, so Divrei Rebbe.
that's North Miami Beach. When one side of the street has
Right.
been places is M&B and one is on a corporate day. And something happens, a car accident, God forbid, and the police have come and then they argue whose jurisdiction.
Oh, really? So Rebbe says that this is a mixture of chulin and tevel together. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, sounds like Rebbe's father, he says hagadol b'chiyav is chayav, and hagadol b'ptur is pater. You have to look at which side of the tree you picked the fruits from. If you picked from this side, then you picked it in Israel. You picked it on that side. You picked it in I don't know what's over there in Lebanon, in Syria, or whatever. You picked it outside of Israel. So the Gemara says, what are we seeing now? We're seeing that it's not 16 amos. That's what we're saying. We're saying that if it's growing in Israel, it's considered in Israel. It's not considered growing in Chutz La'aretz, right? According to Ula, it would be growing from the neighbor's land and growing in Chutz La'aretz. The Gemara says, Ad kan le'pligiel the marsav yesh beir marsav re'ein breira. There's a discussion over here. No, breira is usually used differently. Breira usually means retroactive division of who's, like by inheritance, who inherited it originally. Yeah, breira means a choice, but it's used in the Gemara to tell me that when afterwards each brother chooses his inheritance, that's what he really owned originally, right when the father passed away. It goes back to retroactive division. That's usually, but over here, breira is just saying a mixture. Do we say that there's a division, or do we say that there's a mixture? Yesh breira, that it's totally divided, or marsav re'ein breira, that it's not divided. Aval gadol b'ptur, but everyone holds that if it grows on the side of Chutz La'aretz, divrei kol pater, that it's entirely pater. And even though it's growing from Israel, what's the aleph over here? Aleph is, I would have thought that the Gemara would ask the other way. Hagadol b'chiyav, everyone holds chayav. We don't say that it's taking from the land of Israel. Okay, so the Gemara says, the reason why we're not confusing, and we're not saying that if it's growing on Chutz La'aretz, that it's considered nourishment from Israel, the reason why we don't say that, even though the roots are going in, it should be exactly the same thing. It should be a mixture of tevel and chul mixed together. The reason why we don't say that, because there's a bedrock that's coming all the way up to the soil, and it's actually growing. The bedrock is stopping the roots from going into the land of Israel. So it's really what's growing on one side. So it's the tree, what we're looking at over here is that a tree, the roots would go like this over the rock, and one side would be entirely Chutz La'aretz, the roots can't get to it. And what's growing on this side is entirely Israel, and the roots can't get to through because the rock is sticking all the way out.
But it still ends up getting mixed up.
Oh, so one second. So if that's the case, Yachi, my time with the Rebbe. So why did Rebbe say that it's a mixture? If it's two separate trees, basically, one is growing in Chutz La'aretz, one's growing out. So what you do is you just take a marker and like make a line straight up the tree, and you say, okay, the branches on this side is this, because it's really growing two separate trees. The Gemara says, well, the Hadar Arvi, because it then mixes together on the top. Now, what's the base over here? The Bahakam Eflagi, and they're arguing about this. The question is now, if the air of the photosynthesis that's taking place in Chutz La'aretz is supporting the growth of the tree on the other side, or does the photosynthesis of each side grow its own tree?
No air, no tree.
This is what to discuss. Okay, yeah.
It's mixed, that's why.
So Marsavar Hailachudika, each one says, well, this side of the tree is growing from this air, from this, and this side of the tree is growing from this side. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Marsavar Hailachudika v'Hailachudika. Each one says, okay. The Gemara now has a question. You told me that it's 16 amas. It's only 16 amas, but we have a mission that says that you could divide that you have to separate a tree. You have to distance a tree from a pit 25 amas, not 16 amas. Otherwise, the roots are going to go in. They're going to break the swimming pool wall. Yeah, you have to distance it 25 amas. Amar Abaya says, Mezel tuva asli. You're right. The roots will really grow very far. But the nourishment, the nutrients that it's taking is only from the first 16 amas. That's a good answer. But more than that, it doesn't weaken the, we had that before. Okay. This answer is a, you know, I don't know if you guys know, Mordechai Alesti. He's a, like an expert in trees and, anyway, he told me that the roots of the tree only go as far as the canopy. You look up at the canopy of the tree, it says that's how far the roots grow. So then I read in a book, it's called Botany in a Day or something. It's not a day, it's a month. But anyway, in this book it said, no, the roots can grow much farther than the canopy. So I asked him. He says, no, that's not. But anyway, here's the teretz. The roots that you need goes up to the canopy, but they'll actually grow further, but not necessarily the nutrients are coming from there.
Don't we have, I'm sorry, in the others, there's a tree that's got small roots and it obviously doesn't reach just to make that.
Right. Yeah.
Types of people.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. They say that with tzaddik tamar yifrach. That the tzaddik to the date tree has very strong roots, I think, but it doesn't grow so tall. But Ge'erez, the cedar, grows very, very tall.
Is it a tree?
Cedar tree?
Is it a date? Is a date tree really a tree in this definition?
I think so.
I think palm trees, what we call palm trees, are generally not trees.
Oh, in the scientific definition.
I'm sorry, I was confused. I was thinking date palm when you said date tree. Excuse me.
The date palm. The date palm. It is a palm. Yeah, the trees in the along the Harding and Collins, Bell Harbor, are the date palms. They brought them here, I guess. But most of our palms are like the coconuts or whatever. So, royal palm, fancy.
Date's not a marriage because there's a lot of talking going on.
Yeah.
Are palms indigenous?
Only there's like I think thousands of different palm trees.
So okay. We have a teretz. Kiyasar Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, Rav Dimi was the traveler that came from Eretz Yisrael. He said that Rish Lakish asked from Rabbi Yochanan, if there's a tree on the border of within 16 amos, what's the din? Exactly what Ula said. Ula was also a traveler by then. So Kiyasar Rabin, when Rabin came, Rabbi Yochanan, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he adjusted it. He said that when Yeshua gave us the land, everyone was Michael he instituted that everyone should be Michael. There's a tree on the border that you should be allowed. They give you the sustenance that's coming from their property, that you should be able to say the passage of the Bikurim. Okay. If you have a tree that's sticking into the friend's field, so kaitzes, cuts it down. Malaya mardeya al gabi amachresha. What's the mardeya? Is the stick. What's the name? There's a stick that's used to poke the animal to make it come. Is there a word for that over there?
Oh.
A poker. Yeah. What? How does it translate in the thing? Oh, is that what it means? It's a plumb line?
Straight line.
Oh, it's a. Can I get a mishkela? Can I get a mishkela? Is a plumb line. The mardeya is the stick that keeps the animal straight. What is it? Goad. Very good. It's a goad. Wow, Meshachayim. Fancy. Okay. Is it spelled with an A or a U? O-U? G-O-A-D. A goad. Okay. So what's happening is they have the stick with the plow. So the guy's going to want to plow his field, and you have a tree there. So what you can do is whatever that stick would hit, that's what he cuts. If it's a carob tree or a sycamore tree, you have to cut it opposite a plumb line. What you do is basically you make a plumb line go down to the property, and you just cut everything straight, even if it's above the stick. You just cut straight across here, like they do with the prune, the thing that goes up and down, and the hedge that cuts the hedges. You just take that thing straight across the. Can I get a mashkelis? Mashkelis is the plumb line.
What we do here legally.
Yeah.
Like when your neighbor's tree goes over you, you're responsible for cutting it, not the neighbor. So that's it, up to the property.
It's going to be like looking very awkward if you just cut everything off. So the tree's going to look like it was sliced in half. You're saying
We do see that a lot, which isn't really appropriate. So you try and work it out.
Beis hashlachim, if it's a property that it needs, you have to give it water. It's and it's blocking the sunlight. So kol ha'ilan k'neged mishkeles. Then all trees, not only the charav of a shikma, but if it's a beis hashlachim, which basically doesn't want the shade, so then every tree is considered like what we just said about a carob and a sycamore, that you cut it along the plumb line. Abba Shaul says kol ilan srak k'neged mishkeles. Every ilan srak, every tree that doesn't give fruit is k'neged mishkeles along the plumb line. Now the Gemara says, 1 second. The Gemara has a question. Abba Shaul, what is Abba Shaul saying? Abba Shaul says he's arguing on the Mishnah. He says kol ilan srak k'neged mishkeles. Well, that's interesting, because we also said in the beis hashlachim is kol ilan k'neged mishkeles, and that was the end of the Mishnah. And in the beginning of the Mishnah we said so is he saying that in every area, it's not just a charav of a shikma, it's not just a carob and a sycamore, it's every tree, or every ilan strak tree? Or is he saying that when it says beis hashlachim, kol ilan k'neged mishkeles, it's not really kol ilan, it's only kol ilan strak. It's only a tree that doesn't give fruit. Is he diminishing it, or is he extending it? So, Tashma, come and listen. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Beis hashlachim, when it comes to beis hashlachim, which was the beginning of the Mishnah, which was the end of the Mishnah, Abba Shaul leimer kol ilan k'neged mishkeles, and they shatzel ra'la beis hashlachim. It says, Abba Shaul says all trees are you cut it along the plumb line because the shade is bad for beis hashlachim. Shema mina reisha kai. It must mean that he's talking about that he's arguing on the reisha, because he agrees to the seifa. It's not just kol ilan strak. It must be that he's arguing on the reisha. Shema mina. What's he arguing on the reisha? We said only that a charav of a shikma, a carob and a sycamore, you cut it like straight along the plumb line. He says, no, every tree that doesn't give fruit, you cut along the plumb line. Amar Abashi Masnisanami Deka. If you look carefully at the Mishnah, you'll see this also. The Ktani Kol Ilan Strak. It says all Ilan Strak. If you say it's talking about the Reisha, Hainu Tani Kol Ilan. That's why he's adding in all trees. If he was talking about the Seifa, then he shouldn't say all, he should just say Ilan Strak, because we said Kol Ilan, and he's limiting it to Ilan Strak. Strak means that it doesn't give fruit. He must be talking, he's talking about the Reisha, the first part of the Mishnah, and he's extending it from Charav of Shikma, not just a caravan of sycamore, he's extending it to more than that. Okay, Ilan, new Mishnah. Ilan a tree that's leaning over the public area, kaitetz, you have to cut it, so that the camel should be able to pass by together with the rider and not get knocked off by the because there's trees that are hanging down in the path. Everyone's going to be ducking down; they don't fall off the animal. Rabbi Yehuda says not an animal, not a camel and its rider, but a camel and its load, either flax or twigs. Rabbi Shimon says no, you should cut every tree right across the path, so that it doesn't extend tumah over the public area. In case someone's buried, or there's a corpse in the private area, people walking in the public area are going to become tummy. So you should cut all the trees down. Man tana dibinizakin basar umdana. Who holds that you only go after right now? Now, what was happening here is when you're going to cut the tree, it's going to grow right back. But we're not concerned about that. You only deal with what's happening right now, and you just cut it right now. But later on, we'll deal with it again. Reish Lakish says, "Machlekes nei." This is a machlekes. Rabbi Lazari, and this is an opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanana was started in the Mishnah in Eisen Chol Tachas Rishus Rabim or Sichon Umayros. Rabbi Eliezer Mater. You're not allowed to dig in the public area and then cover it over, because if you dig in the public area and cover it over, that cover is going to last while it lasts. What happens when it gets weaker? Who's going to notice that it got weaker? Right? So basically, you weaken and then you put in a temporary fix. So Rabbi Eliezer says no, the temporary fix is fine. And you just have to make sure that you replace it when it's necessary. So it's Rabbi Eliezer that holds that we're not concerned about what's going to be later, only concerned about what's now. He's mater as long as it can carry. Right now, an animal can go over it carrying a load of stones. Rabbi Yochanan could really go according to Rabban Hassan dim the mafches for lavadaiti. Over there, it could be that the covering over that pit is going to get weaker and you won't notice. But over here, what do you mean it's going to grow and you're not going to notice? Of course you're going to notice. Over here, it's so visible. Over there, you don't know that it's rotting on the inside. But over here, what do you mean rotting on the inside? Over here, it's a tree. It's growing. It's sticking over the line, or it's not sticking over the line. Here, you can see it. So that's where really we're not concerned. Over there, it was something that we wouldn't know about. Rabbi Yehuda Imert Gamal Tan Pishtan Echavilis Meres. Yehuda says that there's a difference. Instead of the animal and the rider, you have to cut it. You have to cut it at the animal and its load. Ibailu, they have a question. Shir Darbi the Nafish, Idoma Shir the Rabbana Nafish. Which one is larger? Rabbi Yehuda's measurement or the Rabbana's measurement? The rider or the load? Pshita the Shir the Rabbana Nafish. The rider is more higher. Disal Kadai Shir the Rabbi Yehuda Nafish. If you would say that Rabbi Yehuda's measurement is more the animal with load. Rabbanan Bashir the Rabbi Yehuda Echavdi. What would the Rabbanan do with the animal and the rider? Elamai the Rabbanan Nafish. Rabbi Yehuda Bashir the Rabbanan Mayavid. What do they do? What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the rabbis? The rabbi said the animal and the rider. What is the rider going to do? It says, well, Efshed the Gachen v'Chalab to say the rider can crouch down. The load can't crouch down. So Rabbi Yehuda wasn't concerned about the rider, right? So it must be that the rider's higher. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon says that you have to cut every tree because of the impurity that could get spread over the public area. Tana Pnei Oil Tumah. It's thought that we're talking about the tent. The tumah is going to spread because of the tent. Shita, Tumah Tanan. That's obviously what we're talking about. says that. He must need to know. From the Mishnah, I could have thought, could have thought that maybe a raven's going to come and throw it over there. Besagi b'dechlule ba'al besagia b'chlule da'al ba'alma kamashvalan. Maybe maybe we could cut it in a way that it won't give tumah. Let me see how it says. I think it means you make hollows, you make spaces, you thin it out. So it says, perhaps a crow, I said a raven, a crow will bring and toss it under the branches and one into the branches. Someone that goes under it is going to become tamei. So it would be sufficient to merely thin out the branches so that nothing could be lodged in them. So Kamash Malana comes to tell us that all the branches will create a tenth of tumah, and because it's going to spread over from the tumah that's on the other side. Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
I want you to know,